Well, we're live
Hello.
now. Hi, hola.
Hey, everybody. Hola.
Hey.
Hola.
Hola a todos.
So, well, we are with Jake Knapp. We're really happy to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Thank you so much for having me. I'm pleased that anybody would want to spend a little part of their quarantine. Actually, I don't know if you guys, everybody on is on quarantine like we are here still. But yeah, still in Spain. Yeah. So thanks for spending some of your trapped time with me.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So, well, I will introduce you. I believe everyone here knows who you are, but just in case. Something I had to say is that if you have any questions in the audience, you can send them here in the chat or in the questions part here, and I can translate them if you send them in Spanish, and we will ask them to Jake, and he will answer if he feels like it.
Probably will.
Okay. Jake spent 10 years at Google and Google Ventures. He created the design sprint process. He's written 2 books, Sprint and Make Time, coached teams at places like Slack, Lego, IDEO, and NASA on design strategy and time management, and has been a guest instructor at MIT and the Harvard Business School. And even though you won't see it here, but he's among the world's tallest designers, right?
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
I found that on your website, so I had to create it. Okay. So I had a first question for you, and well, we can mix the questions I have written down with the questions in the audience and that. And the first question was, what was your first job?
My first job was, well, the first work I did was for my dad, and the first thing I can remember doing for him was picking up rocks in our field. I grew up on a farm, and there were a lot of rocks out in the field, and you had to pick them up so that the mower so you could mow the field. And I would get paid by the bucket of rocks. So that was good. That was good training, for a lot of things you have to do in life are just like filling up a bucket and then carrying it somewhere. And then my next job was my first job that was outside of the family was a dishwasher. And I worked as a dishwasher when I was maybe like 13 years old. And then I had a series of jobs working in restaurants. I grew up in a small town on an island, and in the summer, a lot of tourists would come to the island, and so there are restaurants. You could get a job just for the summer. It's perfect for a kid. So I used to work in the summer, and then sometimes in the school year. Anyway, those were my jobs for many, many years. And actually, I think I learned some things from working in restaurants that are helpful for being a product, trying to build products, trying to be a designer, work with people. And it's the idea of service, that the first thing you're doing is trying to help the people who you're working with to accomplish whatever it is they want to accomplish. And in the context of a restaurant, that might mean I'm trying to help them get their place clean. I was never even a waiter, but I'm going to bust their plates when they get dirty. I'm going to refill your water or your coffee. I'm trying to anticipate when you might need it. And it's a similar thing when you're working with people. I think if you come in, it helped me, I think, to come in with a frame of mind of trying to be helpful. That's often better than knowing the right answer, especially since I've found the more I work that I almost never know the right answer.
Yes, that's right. So, well, then came Google, and now you're a best-selling author.
Well, there's a few steps in between there. After some different odd jobs in college, I got a job working at Oakley, the sunglasses company, while I was still in college, and I worked there for a summer, and then I kept working sort of remotely. Actually, I was working remotely. This is like 22 years ago or so, but no video calls, just phone calls and emails. But that was my. What's that?
That's innovation.
Yeah, that's innovation. That's innovation. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I was working remote before it was cool. Yeah, so I worked there for a while. I was a designer. I was making animated GIFs. Another thing that it's astonishing we're still doing, like 20 some years later, that animated GIFs are still cool. But that was part of my job, was making animated GIF ads, and then animated GIFs that would go on the Oakley homepage for when the new sunglasses would come out or whatever. And then then I got a job at Microsoft, and so I'd worked at Oakley for a couple years, and then I worked at Microsoft for actually. Then I had a job in the meantime as a receptionist at a company in Seattle, where I taught myself how to use. Sorry, this is way more information than anybody wanted, but I taught myself how to use Flash, which
Okay.
you guys are all probably too young to know what Flash is, but it was I kind of learned how to code, and I had taught myself how to do some coding when I was a kid, and then actually a person in college is still a kid, but I was kind of learning how to adapt that to this new thing, and then I got a job. I made a portfolio for myself while I was a receptionist, because most of the time, the office where I worked, I didn't have to do anything. So, sometimes I need to like refill the fridge for people, or like greet people when they came in, or, call people or whatever. But a lot of the time there was nothing. And so I would just learn how to use Flash. And then I made this portfolio of my work at Oakley, and I just went to town on it with Flash because I was excited about the animations. I had a little character on there that you could you touch him and he would do push-ups, and anyway, so I finally applied for a job at Microsoft. I was in Seattle, and that's where Microsoft is, or near there. And I got it, and they told me afterwards that they gave me the job not because of my work at Oakley, but it was because they really liked the portfolio itself, like the animated guy and all the stuff I had done in Flash. So that was kind of cool. You never know how that stuff might work out. I worked at Microsoft for 5 or 6 years. I worked on a product called the Encarta Encyclopedia, and which was on CD-ROM. So this is very old-fashioned, old days. And
IDEO.
we actually okay, cool. You guys look too young. They would ship the boxes with, we would ship boxes with CD-ROMs out to stores. It was just a different world, and that was a really good learning experience, though, because it was a very professional team. They had been building this encyclopedia for 10 or 12 years. They just knew how to build software. They knew how to go through a process, and so that was how I learned how you make software. And then I went from there. I went to Google finally, and was at Google for a few years working on Gmail. I started the project that became Google Meet, and then I started doing this design sprint process, and went to Google Ventures, did design sprints for about 5 years, and the last 2 or 3 I've been on my own writing and teaching the design sprint process. And yeah, sorry, that's way more. That is way more than anybody asked for, but that's the whole story.
Podcaster.
It's nice to know like the background. Because we always like when you read your introduction, or when somebody introduces yourself, we talk about Google and about Silicon Valley, and it's nice to know that there's something. I believe that when you're a junior designer, if you're I don't know, trying to work for the first time in your life, it's nice to know that somebody that's now like famous or something like that. Or somebody that takes that people ask selfies from, also knows also has another background and has been through a lot of intermediate phases until getting to Google. So that's nice.
Well, there's something that is very I find it very hard when I read about people who are speaking at conferences or writing books or whatever, or just when you look at somebody's profile on Twitter, whatever it is, like wherever you encounter someone, you look at their profile on LinkedIn. We know about this effect in social media where people craft the image of themselves, and that's that crafted image that you see, and it's very carefully curated, and you don't see all of the struggles. I mean, right now, I'm in my home, and I'm in my teenage son's bedroom because he has the cleanest, like most well-organized room in the house. But if I walked around the house, you'd be like, that guy is nuts. Like, what? It's a mess. It's crazy. It looks so chaotic. Like, and in a way, this is like the way we present ourselves all the time. It's like you find the best room in the house and the best backdrop you can, and you try to look like you've got things clean and tidy. When I put, what's in my bio, I am carefully cherry picking what I think will be the very most impressive sounding little bits, because a lot of what I need to do is make people think I'm credible so they'll believe me. And I hope that serves a bigger picture, right? But I'm trying to make myself look as good as possible, but it is not actually an accurate picture of who I am. And there's a whole nother story you can tell about everything I've ever done. It's just a list of how ways that I screwed up, ways that I was in the right place at the right time, ways that I take credit for things or exaggerate pieces of what I do that aren't reflective of the larger picture and what was happening most of the time. I was at Google Ventures for 5 years, and the companies who I talk about working with there are Slack and 23andMe and Nest and Uber and Medium. And I talk about those companies because there's a chance that people have heard of those companies and that they'll think by association, gosh, if Jake worked with those companies, Jake must be in some way responsible for those companies' success, or at least because they were willing to work with him, that, he must be really good. And the reality is that I worked with maybe 150, and if you count all the people who I talked to, met like 200, 300 companies. Most of them you've never heard of. Many of them went out of business. The amount of time I spent with the companies I talk with is the same amount of time, more or less, that I spent with all these other companies. It's just that you've heard of those companies, right? So it might be like a week or 2 weeks at a time. And the reason why I got in the room, it wasn't necessarily because I was such a genius. It was because I was lucky enough to be at Google and was lucky enough to have been there early enough that I was able to get this job at Google Ventures. There are a lot of different ways to interpret what you see when you see that highlight reel that's in somebody's bio. And I think it's important to keep that in mind when you're early in your career, wherever you are in your career. I find it important to keep in mind. This morning, I was on a run right before coming on this call. I was on a run. I'm listening to a podcast, and Brene Brown, the author, is interviewing this other author who writes fiction. I'm trying to write fiction right now, so I can't wait to hear it. And she starts talking about this woman's accomplishments in the beginning, and I was just like, I just felt like this tall, I just felt like, man, I can't do it. Like, listen to how great that person is, and I have to remind myself, that's the highlight reel. And there's a lot in between what you hear, that little piece that you hear, and the reality of a person's life. So anyway, that's I think that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah. For every aspect in your life, for work and also for personal life too. Instagram is like the perfect example for that. And you don't use Instagram.
I don't know. I have, there's a couple of things that are really, no judgment if other people use it. Because for me, there's two problems. One is that I really get kind of addicted to things like that very quickly. So, so I have the only thing that I use that's for social media that I use very much is Twitter. And I have a program, software on my computer called Freedom. And I use it to shut off my access to Twitter, except for like Tuesdays on one computer. Like, I have two computers and it's only on one computer, and I can only use it on Tuesdays. So often I forget. In fact, I've turned that off and I need to turn it back on, but it's because I'll just be there all the time and I'll be going crazy. And then the second problem I have is that I look at what other people are doing and I feel lame, and it makes me feel bad. And so between those two things, I just can't handle it. I know a lot of people use Instagram, love it, and don't get that feeling of, oh man, everybody's life is so cool. But for me, it's tough, man. I struggle with that.
Yeah, sure. Also, social media in general is important for your work too, because there's a lot of talk about design sprints and so on, and about your books in social media. So how do you manage that? Do you have somebody that checks that for you, or you just ignore them?
I for a while I tried to check it, and I talked myself into the idea that it really mattered for me to do it. But I've stopped. Now this is, I do go on Twitter, and I try to go once a week and look through the notifications, and I try to see if anybody asks me a question about design sprints, and if I can answer it in the few minutes that I have allowed myself with my timer for Twitter, with freedom, then I'll answer it. And if somebody sends me a message on LinkedIn, I basically try to encourage people to just email me on my website, and on LinkedIn it says like email me. And I also have found that a better way for me to share stuff is with a newsletter. I have a newsletter, and if you haven't signed up, you can. It's you can sign up at thesprintbook.com or jakeknapp.com. And I also try to share stuff in our podcast. So I have a podcast called Jake and Jonathan, and those two things I've found, they took a really long time to build up an audience of people. And the audience it's not huge, but that audience is much more, I think, forgiving of me. You can hear already, I talk a lot, and I'm not good at like the little clever soundbite in Twitter or the great photo on Instagram. Those have been good ways for me to share stuff and talk about stuff, but not worry so much about how people react.
Attached to it.
You just do it. It goes out. It's gone. I don't see likes or comments, and that helps me. Honestly, say it again.
Or haters. You also ignore that.
Or haters. Totally. And I'm going to get to the point in my life where I don't care about the haters, where I don't, where it doesn't bother me if I'm not getting as much likes or as much traffic as I want. Maybe I'll get there, but I'm not there yet. And it is better for me to do this sort of one-way thing where I don't have to get stressed out and manage it. And usually if people will email you directly, like, those people are rarely going to be like dissing you. It's a different thing when somebody's like writing a comment in public. They might diss you, but if somebody writes you a one-to-one message, it's more rare that it's going to be anything but like, they want help maybe, or they just want to say something nice. And that stuff is cool. I also can recognize that a lot of that stuff works for me because of the book. It works because there are other ways I can sort of share.
Yes, I was also going to ask you that maybe the books are also like a channel for you to communicate without having that. And
they totally are. And I have tried over time I try to spend more of my effort making things, spending more time to make something that will hopefully have a bigger impact. Whether it might be a blog post, or a video or whatever, but rather than constantly doing like quick little things.
Quick posts.
Just because the quick posts, they're not really quick. Like, it takes me time to think and try to craft what I'm going to say. And then after I post it, I'm thinking a lot about how people respond and kind of trying to manage it.
And also you post one and you have to think about the other one.
Totally. Yeah. And if you feel like that's a thing that you do, it's an ongoing investment, just as you say. Like, you're going to be doing it again and again and again. And I'm not saying that it's bad. And like it's not. It's just the decision shouldn't be like, it's not obvious to me that you have to do that, and it's not obvious that It's not in many cases like you just really have to weigh the work. What is the real cost of doing it for your attention, for your emotional well-being, and what's the real benefit? Because I've also found that by almost stopping posting stuff on Twitter, I don't have like a lot of followers, but like a pretty good amount, like because of the book, and actually they're not that valuable. I think when you get to a certain level of of followers, like it becomes really valuable. But I don't know. I'm not there, and I don't really want to get there.
It also makes you look a bit more mysterious, and you build up some suspense. And when you release a book, there's something like there to talk about. If you're always posting, then I don't know, maybe.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the people who always post, part of it too is just that I'm not amazingly good at it. And there are, if you're good at it, and if it doesn't bring you down emotionally, or if it doesn't fracture your focus as it does for me, if you're good at it and you're doing it all the time, it only helps. Because other thing I've kind of learned in my career is that you are always like, everything we do is, you got to think about marketing. And marketing is a really powerful frame for the work you do inside a company. And when I look back and think about when I was successful and when I was not successful working whether it's inside Oakley or Microsoft or Google, it's the successes were because I marketed to my colleagues. I marketed the idea effectively to my colleagues. The products we worked on, they were, when they succeeded, to the extent that they could, it was because we marketed effectively. We told the story effectively, and there was harmony between what we built and what the story we told. But you can build the greatest thing, you can write the most wonderful book in the world, but if you don't have a way to get it out, get it to people, and market it, and tell the story in a way they can care about enough to take it and try it, it doesn't matter. And designers often, or at least my experience, will, even anybody who's working on a product can think of marketing as like almost phony. It's like this outside thing that gets stuck on at the end, and they don't really get it, and like we're the hardcore doing the work. But this idea of like marketing as something icky is you have to be careful of it. And I recognize there's a tension when I'm talking about like social media, because social media as marketing can be really effective. For me, it's just not the best way to do it. The best way to do it is newsletter, podcast, blog posts, trying to get other people who do it well to do it for me. And I've benefited hugely, for example, from AJ and Smart, who are great on social media, great on Instagram, YouTube, doing stuff all the time, talking about the design sprint. They're really good at that. Like, it wouldn't look the same if I did it. And if I did it, I wouldn't be able to make some of the other things that I make, or honestly be as happy of a person a lot of the time. It just brings me down.
You also participate on online events like this. So
say it again.
That you also participate on this event, so that's also marketing.
That's right. This event is like one of the It's
marketing,
and it is it is marketing, right? And like for me, so as an example, this is great for me, right? I'm just like rambling. I'm having a good time. I'm talking to y'all, and like, how many people are in this call? 50, right? So like, that's great. That's a huge number of people. It's not as big as like all of Instagram or like all of Twitter, right? So like the audience sizes, but you guys, if you don't hang up, you'll listen to me talking for an hour. Like, that's awesome. We had such a better connection right now than the kind of weird, like, I'm just throwing a rock into the ocean kind of feeling of posting stuff. So yeah, there are different ways to go about it. And I definitely think if I imagine myself starting out as a designer now, like, how intimidating to have begun my career. And I think back to being like 19 and my first my first job at Oakley. Like, I had a job in college, but it was like, it wasn't like a real job. Like, it was super lucky to be in that spot. I just think about, like, if I imagine starting now, the pressure, because you can see so much of what everybody's doing online, and everybody looks like they got their stuff so together. They're such experts and strong opinions about things. And it's like, oh man, like, how am I gotta like build a presence on Twitter and Instagram and, God knows what else kids use. And like, I gotta TikTok. Like, yeah, TikTok. I gotta write Medium posts. Like, I didn't write anything until I was in my 30s. Like, I didn't share anything publicly. It would give me like 12 years to just do work and think about it, and like, it's hard. I can't imagine how intimidating it is to start out today with all that stuff and all those expectations. Yeah, because I find it intimidating now, and I've been doing this for over 20 years. So wherever you are in your career, if you find that stuff stressful, it's stressful, but I'm not sure how much it really matters. And it's totally okay to not be good at everything,
That's a nice message. And you talked about writing. You are writing nonfiction now?
I'm trying to write fiction. Yeah, I'm trying to write a science fiction book. I shouldn't say trying. I should be more confident about it. I am writing it. Wow. I have a draft. I just finished a draft of it. And I'm kind of like leaving it alone for a while, so I can, when I look back at it, I'll have fresh eyes. And it's really hard though. And it is, it's fun, but also like not fun to do something that's new to you, where you don't have the skills really to do it. And I have to be careful about the way I talk about it, because if I talk about it too much, like, this is my new thing, like, I'm doing this thing, it really stresses me out, because I may or may not actually succeed at it, right? Like, nobody might ever see this book, because I might not be able to get it published. I mean, like I've written a novel before and like nobody wanted to publish it. So I'm trying to do that again. And there's no evidence that it'll be good, but it's good for me to do this like hard thing. And I feel like I'm learning skills and learning some resilience that I'll be able to apply to whatever I do afterwards. So it won't be a waste. Like, you know, even whatever happens with the book, it won't be a waste. It's very good. And it's very good for me to do this thing that I have wanted to do for a really long time and not just like put it off forever, but actually try to do it and do it and maybe fail. And, but we'll see. We'll see.
Okay, great. And what's that writing process like? What's like, do you have a routine or something, or somebody that helps you like reading the manuscript or something like that?
Yeah, it's good questions. It's different from the other two books because let's see. I'll try to like not talk about this for 1,000 years because I could. I could talk about it for longer than I will take to write the book. It's with fiction, with nonfiction. You write a proposal for the book before you write the book. And the proposal is, you know, kind of an introduction to the ideas in the book. It talks about what the key stories in the book might be and how the book will be structured. And if you read any business book, the first chapter of the book or the introduction to the book is almost always the proposal. Like once having written a proposal, now I look at a business book and I'm like, oh yeah, like they did what we did. Like once you've written the proposal, you want to reuse it because you've done all this work to make it. But it's a lot, like you don't write the whole book. You just write that first thing and you also talk about how you might market the book and, you know, who do you know who has a lot of followers online or whatever, who might help you share it, things like that. Yeah. And then you submit that to the, you know, I worked with an agent to help write those. And then the agent submits those to the publishers. And then the publisher just, you know, they offer to publish the book for you based on that. And then once you've done that, then you're working with an editor and you're working with your agent and you have a schedule. And, you know, and in my case, I had co-author to help me. So there's all this framework to help get it done. With fiction, it's different. You got to write the book first, the whole thing, and then you got to talk to the agent. Then you got, so there's no guarantee anybody cares about what I'm writing about, right? Like that's number one. Like with the nonfiction, you find out pretty fast if anybody cares. Fiction, who knows? There's no deadline. Nobody's waiting for this thing to be done. So I have to create the structure myself. And there's no partner, there's no person to kind of help usher it along. So one thing that I've done over the last few months to help with this is I started working with a former colleague of mine from Google Ventures. Her name is Kristen Briantes, and she's a great coach for this. And so she's helped me like set up deadlines. She helps me get more serious. She just pushes me. She's like, dude, you need to stop checking email all the time. You need to stop answering sprint stuff all the time if you're going to get this thing done. And you know, like, and so I found I did not have all the tools just on my own to like power through that process. I had done it before, but I'm finding this project is more challenging. And what's going on in general in my life, and of course, COVID-19 is like one piece of that, but just all the things that are going on in my life just make it harder this time. So, I have had to seek out help. It's not automatically built in.
Nice. And did the lockdown help you write more, or was it counterproductive?
Yeah, both. At first, very counterproductive. But I have kids. Kids are at home now, so that's wild. And there's just like the general, like, and my son got it, was really sick and still kind of sick. I mean, he'll be fine, but it was very stressful and continues, you know, the day to day of like trying to have the kids do school at home or whatever is like kind of crazy. But also it helped because all of the work that I had planned, I mean, all my work is like in-person, you know, events like the one with you guys, or, you know, giving a talk or working with a team. So all that stuff just disappeared. And that was stressful in its own way, but the result is like, I'm like, okay, well, I might as well make something out of this. Like I have this time, I'm not traveling, I'm not doing anything else. So I'm going to kind of commit to this deadline for myself of finishing a draft. And I was able to do it. I like was in tears most of the time, but I was able to sort of do it. So it's helped.
Okay, great. I read some questions here regarding sprints, obviously. Do you ever get...
Yeah. Sorry,
I feel like...
Just used up half your time talking about everything else besides sprints.
Do you get tired of talking about sprints, or do you enjoy it?
I enjoy it. It's weird. I don't get tired of talking about it. And I'm not sure why that is. I guess I really find the idea exciting. And, to all of you who are joining the call, like I really admire your efforts to try to, if you're trying to do a sprint, you're trying to bring a new idea to a team of people in a way that like will help them waste less time. Will help them spend more of their work, which is a huge part of our lives, on something that they will hopefully actually care about and will feel really like a true expression of what they want to do. I think that really is meaningful. It just gets me like fired up to talk about it. So yeah, I'm not tired. Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. I'll translate one by Se Meave. She says that she asks if the 5-day sprint has changed, taking into account the coronavirus, of course, if you have some idea regarding that.
Yeah, totally. So I'm going to share a link in the chat. And actually, I can just say the link. It's pretty simple. It's thesprintbook.com/remote, but I'll also paste it in here. And this is a guide to remote sprints that we made since the coronavirus. And that is something that slowed down my fiction writing process a bit, but
of course.
But basically, John Zaratsky, my co-author on Sprint, and we talk all the time. We do a lot of stuff together, and we were like, man, like what can we do to try to be helpful? And because everybody wants to help out, but like there's very little we can actually do. And we did realize that like a lot of people
were talking
doing
about
sprints already. Yeah, might need to do this over video. And we didn't have much experience though doing it. So we asked a friend of John's named Jackie Colburn to help us. And then we put out the call to sprint experts just around the world, people who had run remote sprints and could tell us about what they had found. And Jackie helped us, and we interviewed people and gathered as many tips as we could. And then we just sort of put it together based on what made sense to us or what we believe about works well in sprints, and the best we could figure out from like what we heard from the most people and all that stuff. We put together this guide. But this guide is like, and this guide, like to answer your question, it is different from a sprint, but it's also, I mean, the good news is like the basic design sprint recipe seems to work well over video. But you do have to do extra work up front. There's a lot of preparation work to make it happen. You have to choose your tools that you're going to use and choose those wisely. And then there's some extra kind of tips and modifications you can do throughout the week to make it work well. And we've my best take on that is in that guide. But I also think it's something that is like I'll learn more about over the coming months and maybe years. I mean, I think that this represents a moment where there's going to be a shift and more things will happen remote. People are just forced to become more comfortable with it. It's gonna change. So this is like the beta version. It'll change more. But the good news is that like the process in general seems to hold up quite well.
Great. Another question. Jason Espinosa says, "Hi Jake, in these tough times." No, it's the same, but in English. Virginia Elastic says, "What are the pros and cons of doing the map as the first exercise in the design sprints?"
The pro is that you get right to the big questions about like, what is this thing? And for me, the design sprint is, there are like a lot of reasons why different things happen at different times and why which thing is in or out. Part of the recipe is the idea that for for me, working at Google Ventures, coming into work with a startup, like I said, I was working with like a different one each week. So I couldn't do a lot of work ahead of time with them to plan what we were going to do. I just wanted to contain it all in the design sprint to make it possible to do these with as many teams as possible, and also to minimize their commitment beforehand so that they could, kind of show up and do it without having to prep a bunch. It's already a lot to ask people to take a week. So I would come in the door on Monday morning, and I would know like kind of what the team was up to, but I wouldn't know a whole lot about it. And those first few activities, what's the long-term goal? I would ask teams to define a metric. How are you going to measure if you reach that long-term goal? What are the things that could go wrong? What are the sprint questions that you have? And then I would like to make a rough draft of the map right there, because for me, that was like when I came in, it was me to sort of understanding what's going on with this team. And also at the same time that I'm acting as an outsider and saying like, hey, I don't really know. You guys could tell me the big picture. I could see around the room that for everybody, this was like perfect. Like they were like, yes, many of them don't know what the big picture is. Sometimes it's not clear at all. And I was comfortable with the discomfort of making the map and comfortable asking those questions and just jumping right in. But I will say that the folks at AJ and Smart, who I respect a lot of people who I respect a lot have decided they prefer to do the expert interviews, the ask the experts conversations first, do those and then make a map. And I have to say, I'm not sure that it matters. I think whichever, if you have the book and you're using the book as your main guide to running a sprint, do it my way. Do the map first. If you've done like the AJ and Smart Masterclass, or if you've already like somehow learned it where you do the Ask the Experts interview first, do that first. It's not that the order of those two is not going to make or break it for you. For me personally, I'm so comfortable and confident with making the map first that I've tried reversing it and it throws me off, feels weird, but I wouldn't worry about that one. There are lots of things in the sprint where there are changes to it and I'll be like, no, don't change that. Here's why. For that one, it's not a huge deal either way. Would you advise a startup that is going through a crisis right now because of the COVID-19 to go through a remote sprint or something like that to ease the things and like find a new roadmap or find a solution to their crisis? Yeah, okay. So this is a good one. And actually, before I answer this, I want to add one more quick note to the previous thing I just thought of. One thing that's helpful about making a draft of the map before you do your Ask the Experts interviews is that the map itself can be a way to help your experts more quickly share information and share it in a way that you can immediately use, because you can have them look at the map and say, okay, I'm just talking to you now, Josefina, I'm just talking to you. You're our expert on, whatever, like you're our CEO. On this map, like what looks wrong to you? What should we change? Or is there an area you want to elaborate on? And I found that was a really helpful foundation for those conversations, which you don't have if you do the interviews first. However, if you do the interviews first, it's probably much easier to draw the map for the first time. So it's kind of like, how hard is it to pay that price of drawing that first draft? Okay, so full stop, move on to what would I advise to startups? So there's a process that John Zeratsky and I had done a few times at Google Ventures, and we just did one last week over video. That is, we call it the opportunity sprint. That's sort of our working title for it, but it's a way for teams to evaluate a few different things that they might want to do a sprint on. So just to compare different opportunities for a design sprint. And that's for a team who's really oh my God, we need to reevaluate our direction. We need to consider where to go. That's probably the best recipe. Unfortunately, we have not written a great guide for it yet, because we realize there's a big need for it and we're kind of working on it, but it'll take a while. The sprint for the sprints. Yeah. It's like a sprint, figure out what should you sprint on, which things are worth sprinting on. It's like a one-day thing. If anybody wants a rough draft of the steps of that thing, you can send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat. It's hey@jakeknapp.com. And I'll email you the sort of schedule of it. And if you've done design sprints, I think you'll be able to figure out how to run it. But I'm sorry that there's not more there yet. I would say though that for teams who know generally what they're working on, but maybe they need to reboot now, I do think there's a lot to recommend a design sprint at this moment if you're suddenly over video, because I was talking to someone after we ran this opportunity sprint, and it doesn't matter whether this was an opportunity sprint or regular design sprint. She said, for the past weeks, everything has been like, I can give something 45 seconds of attention at a time. And it's so wonderful to be able to actually focus on something and make progress on a problem. And I think that's something the design sprint can offer right now, where for many people, I mean, clearly this crisis has a huge effect on the economics of a business, but it also has a huge effect on, we all have our own like micro crises going on in our homes. And if you're trying to work and also trying to parent, for example, or worried about loved ones, whatever's going on, there are a million reasons why your attention might be fragmented. And so having a script for this and a way to do your work together and collaborate together, where you don't have to just make it all up, and you don't have to, you feel like you can define a focus for this session of time, something great will happen, and then everything else happens outside. I think it could be a really good moment for it.
Yes, I have a theory for that, and I think that some people, like, have you seen that there was a lot of people baking bread, for example, or baking cakes. I believe that it's something like that makes people comfortable to follow a recipe and to know where to go and to know what the product will be.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think you're totally right, because that's the big thing right now. Yeah. It's just like nothing feels certain, and nothing. I'm like, what sequence of activities can I do, and know where they're going to lead to in terms of my work, in terms of like my plans. I don't know. It's all out of my hands, and it's something that you can. And it's not to say that like that's all the design sprint is, but something that you can just like wrap your hands around and say like, here's a recipe, and at the end we'll bake something.
Yeah,
it feels really nice. It feels really nice.
It's nice and safe.
Yeah, totally.
Before taking a risk or eventually innovating or creating a new product, it's nice to feel safe when you don't know if you have to use the mask, if you have to take the mask off, if you have to wash the vegetables. So that's something nice. I have another question that popped in here. Hey, what will you say to all these frustrated designers who are working for agencies that are basically selling projects using your methodology, but not actually applying it on projects? Agencies that see design thinking just as a way to convince client, but not as a mindset.
Well, I think that
they're not going to survive for so long.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think if you, that's a good point. I mean, this is a tough moment in the world to give this advice, but if you work for a company and you think that the way they operate is BS, you should definitely be considering finding another place to work, because most of the people I talk to who work at agencies, well, maybe not, I don't know. Like a lot of the people I talk to who work at agencies, they feel really good about the work they do. They feel really good about the way that they approach things, and they believe in the approach. So if you don't believe in the work you're doing, something is wrong, and that you should not accept that. That it may be that because of what's going on in that moment in your life, in the world, whatever, like you have to put up with it for a period of time. And I recognize how easy it is for me to sit here in my bed, my son's bedroom, and like give you advice about your life, but like don't accept that for long. That goes beyond like the process or whatever. And like trying to change, if you think that the people who are leading your company, your project, whatever, if you don't believe in their values, if you think that they're just not aligned with what you do, and like believe, like in their heart, why they're doing the work they're doing, there's no strategy for like changing them. That's like getting into a relationship, like a romantic relationship with somebody, thinking you're going to change the way they are, like by being in the relationship. That's not going to happen. That's bad news. So definitely, like, I don't have a silver bullet for you to change them. But I will say this, for teams who use design sprints as a way to start a project with a customer, and maybe they're like, we've been doing this thing we do at our agency for a really long time. Here's a way that person might not be like, they might be sincere, right? They might be using it, not all the time, but they might be sincere. It's this, like, we have this way that we do our work at our agency, whatever it is. We build software as well as this, or we do whatever, marketing, whatever we do. We have our old way of doing it. Hey, the design sprint seems kind of cool. It also seems like a way we could start off projects. And yeah, maybe we're able to convince people to do it with us more easily. I mean, to me, I would think it might be harder to convince people to do a design sprint, but if you find that's the opposite, great. So you do a design sprint, but then you still keep doing your old work the way you always did it afterwards. You know what? That's okay. I think that's okay. The design sprint was never meant to be like, you do this now all the time, but it does have a lot of structures inside of it that are very intentionally designed to make people change the way they work, make them change the perception they have about their colleagues, make them change the way they make decisions, make them change the way they think about their customers and who they are. And it's all kind of wrapped into this tricky package of, here's a fast way to make a prototype. And maybe that's compelling to your customers, and maybe that's even compelling to the design agency itself. But I believe, and I don't know how much evidence I have that this is true, but I think it is true, that if you go through a design sprint once, twice, many times, you cannot help but be changed by that experience. And it will affect the way you approach other work and the way you approach and respect your colleagues and your customers. I don't think you can escape it. That was certainly the intention with it, was it would, a startup who would go through a design sprint would go back to working the normal way that they worked after the design sprint was over. We wanted that and expected that, but we also wanted them to be changed by that moment. We wanted the leaders to be changed, to think in a new way about how they made decisions, to have their eyes opened to who their customers were, to have their eyes open to who the people on their team were in a different way. And so I hope that will have a positive benefit, even if people don't realize it or aren't trying to get it.
Nice. Well, we have, I don't know if there's any question, but I have more questions. One is, which is your favorite app right now?
Oh, my favorite app right now. I use an app on my phone called Cactus. Mm-hmm. And I have used for a long time Headspace for meditation. I started using that again recently, and I found that, like, when I'm sitting down to write, you asked earlier about routine, and that's one that I found I went back to. I used to use it all the time, and I kind of got away from it. And it's the easiest thing in the world to get away from, because it feels like a waste of time. Every time it's like, I'm going to spend like 10 minutes. And I really want to be in privacy, because I'm going to look like an idiot sitting with my eyes closed, listening to the headphones. It just feels so cheesy. And it feels so wasteful when I know, like, gosh, my wife has given me, like, 90 minutes to work on this. I need to use every 90 minutes productively. But I found that, like, spending 10 or 15 minutes doing Headspace first means that the rest of that time actually gets used. It's not my head bouncing around and me, like, checking the news. And so it's like it's an investment that's worthwhile. I also started using this app called Cactus, and it's a new app. And actually, I know the folks who developed it. They used to work at Blue Bottle Coffee, who we mentioned in the book. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like Headspace if you don't have time for Headspace. Like, it's just you flip through, and it gives you like a prompt to kind of think about, and you just kind of think about it, but there's no meditation, there's no audio. It's just, you just read a few of these little, like, quick notes and prompts, and it just kind of is a different way to be mindful. So I've gotten in the habit of looking at that in the morning, and then, I try to be in the habit of doing Headspace before I sit down to write. It's hard. It's always hard to talk myself into it, but I always am glad I did.
Okay. And what is your least favorite app?
Probably Zoom. I don't like Zoom for a number of reasons. For one thing, it's just, it personally, like, I am so frustrated that Google Meet didn't become that thing, like that Zoom blew up. So I'm just like disappointed, you know. But I also, it's annoys me so much, all the little pop-ups and weird like things that come up, because for the people in like, I can't tell you how many times I have to connect to a Zoom call and I forget to do my audio or whatever. And like, it's okay. Like I've done that so many times like that. But for my 9-year-old son has to use it sometimes for school. And like, he gets so mad. And like, he's missing time with his friends. Like, he's just like, so like aggravated with it. And, you know, or my wife, who hadn't used it before, like when she has to use it, she's like, this is crazy. And I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right. It is kind of crazy. Like there's a pop-up in the browser and everything is telling you like, don't do this. It's going to like, you know, it's like everything you'd see anywhere in a computer that's like, this is going to give me a virus on my computer, like for sure. But yeah, so Zoom kind of annoys me. Zoom's also great though, right? Like, I mean, Zoom's also great. So.
Okay. 2 questions, and I believe we can end the talk.
Yeah, I'm happy to go a little over if you guys want, and I'll try to answer more quickly so we can get through some of people's questions.
Okay.
Great. I had another question that was, what inspires you?
I'm inspired by, I guess, sort of different things. Like I'm always inspired by people who make something that, and I can see the story, somehow I know the story or read the story or hear about how hard it was to make it. Like when people really struggle to make something. And I think in a way this goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning with like the bio, you know, of somebody and like their background. And so often what we see is like the finished product, and you just think like, oh wow, that's great. Like, and it's intimidating too at the same time. How the heck did they do that? Like, and I love hearing about the difficulty and the struggles of making things. And when people work really hard, and when you can see the result of something that took a lot of persistence, and so it always takes luck, but it also takes, you know, a lot of repetition and a lot of like just trying to make things. And you know, sometimes something that's inspired me recently. There's a woman named Sarah Cooper, and you can find her on Twitter. And we talk about like not using Twitter, but and she used to be a designer at Google. I met her. I know her like just a tiny bit from working with her at Google. Super smart. She led design on Google Docs. But what she really wanted to do was comedy, and she tried to be a comedian before coming to Google, or before going into design. Went into design, was in design for a few years, and then left, and has been working on being a comedian now for a few years. And she just, in the last like 2 or 3 weeks, has like exploded on Twitter with these. She does these she lip syncs Donald Trump. So it's like little clips of Donald Trump talking, and she acts it out. She like memorizes the exact words and all the things, and then she does these little quick. And that's actually, it's on TikTok, but they're posted on Twitter, so you can find them. And it's just exploded, and she has like almost 1 million followers now. Like it's just like, it's going crazy, and it's so fun to see that, because she's been hilarious and awesome like forever, but she finally hit on that thing that everybody can like recognize how great it is. And having just kind of followed her career for a while, I know that there's so much work behind that. It looks like she just was successful like out of nowhere, but actually she's been doing it for years and years and years and years and years, and trying different things. And when those things, you know, didn't, and sometimes it must be like, so I see her tweets now that are so funny, and there's like, you know, there might be like 40,000 likes or something on her tweets because so many people are paying attention to her. But she was writing stuff that funny years ago, and it's just, you know, and there were like, people liked it, but there wasn't as big of an audience. It doesn't mean that she wasn't good before. And I don't know, I love stuff like that. I love seeing, because it reminds me that some of us were like never going to hit it big, but it doesn't mean what we're doing doesn't matter, and it doesn't mean that like putting in that effort time and time again, it doesn't count. And so I get inspired by seeing like the work that that like my older son puts in every day going to school. He has migraines like every day. Like, he has a migraine, and he shows up anyway. He's like in pain, and he does the schoolwork, and he just powers through it. And like, I just love seeing people do their best. That inspires me, I guess. Sorry, that wasn't fast at all. That wasn't a fast answer at all. I'm going to try to be fast now and get through you.
Don't worry. Diogo Campos says, knowing what you know, what would you change, if anything, in the design sprint process?
I think that there have been some really nice improvements afterwards, after the book came out, that other people came up with, and so I would put those back. Like, I would put those into the process whenever there's like a revised version of the book, and I don't know when that'll happen, but hopefully eventually. It'll include the Noten map, which is a technique that this guy Steph in Switzerland came up with, and it's a great way to get started on the map. It would include storyboarding 2.0, which comes from AJ and Smart. But in general, with the design sprint, like, I think that it like, the process generally is right. I mean, it's a simple, like, straightforward problem solving process, so it doesn't need massive overhaul. I wish it had a name that, like, I wish it had a better name, but I actually, even though I think about it a bit, I can never think of a better name for it. But it's confusing to people. Like, design, people have a lot of like preconceptions about what it means if it says design, and people, sprint, if they've done agile sprints, like they might have a preconception about that. So it could have a better name for sure.
Yeah, sure. The last question to end this.
Okay.
Would you like to recommend something? It can be a movie, music, a project, whatever you want, to the audience.
Okay, yeah. Well, I will recommend Brene Brown to the audience. Brene Brown's been around for a long time, and there's a chance that you, like me, have not listened to her stuff because it didn't sound like it was something I would like. And sometimes I weirdly get like turned off by things being really popular. I'm like, if something's really popular, I probably won't like it. That sounds dumb. And I watched her, she has a special on Netflix. So if you have Netflix, you can watch that. That was my first sort of introduction to her. She has TED Talks too, and I haven't seen them yet, but I know she's just an amazing, inspiring speaker. And there's probably no way you can listen. And she has a podcast. I've started listening to her podcast now too. She's super, super popular. And if there's a chance that you haven't listened to her because she's so popular or because it just doesn't sound like your thing, like, give one of those things a try. Give something that's free to you a try, whether it's if you have Netflix, watch that, or watch a TED Talk. It's just inspiring, and it just makes you feel good. It makes me feel like like I can do it, and like it's worth doing it. So that's my recommendation.
Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot for joining us. It has been really nice. And well, hope you're well, and hope your fiction writing goes well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I need it. I need all the good wishes I can get. So thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jake.
Thanks everybody for being on. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.